He disappeared after his car was seen swerving across the highway. Some witnesses say that no one was driving it, but others claim to have seen someone else not matching his description jump out of the passenger seat and run into the woods. This is the mysterious disappearance of Logan Schiendelman, and nothing is more bizarre to me than when someone goes missing after crashing their car. There are so many cases like this, it seriously needs to be studied. So 19-year-old Logan was last seen on May 19th, 2016. He lived with his grandma and sister in Tumwater, Washington, and that morning he told his grandma that he would likely be away for the entire weekend. Logan never knew his dad and was raised by his grandma pretty much all of his life, even though his mom lived close by in Olympia. His grandma said that on that morning, Logan seemed nervous, which wasn't like his usual self. He said that he had an epiphany about himself, and when she asked him what it was, he said that he couldn't really explain it. She said that they would talk more about this later that night, and then they both went off to work, but this would be the last time that she would ever talk to him. At around 2 p.m. a day later, multiple people started calling 911 after seeing Logan's car swerve across 3 lanes on I-5 near Tumwater and Maytown in Thurston County. People driving by said that it appeared that no one was driving the car, but eventually the car crashed into the center median, and this is where this case gets bizarre. Several people said that they saw a white man with either brown or red hair jump out of the passenger seat and then run into the woods along the interstate. When police arrived, they found Logan's car abandoned near exit 95, but no one was inside. This was about 20 miles from his home. All of his personal belongings were still inside the car, including his wallet, driver's license, and phone. They initially searched for roughly 6 hours in the surrounding woods, but nothing was found or stood out, so they had his car impounded. Meanwhile, Logan's grandma had no idea what was happening until later that night, when Logan never returned home. It wasn't totally uncommon for him to not come home for a day or two being a young kid, but by the next day she had a feeling that something was really wrong. So she ended up tracking Logan's phone to where it last pinged, which was in Olympia, and so she figured that he was just visiting his mom who lived in that area. I didn't even know that this was legal, but apparently the Thurston County Police Department was closed for the weekend, so Logan's grandma had to wait 2 days to report him missing. When she did though, the police told her everything that had happened a few days prior, how witnesses saw his car swerving across the interstate and how his car was impounded later that day after it crashed. This was complete news to her, and this is when she was given back all of his personal belongings. But with all of this information, she was able to report him missing. Logan's uncle, who was a retired Thurston County sheriff, kicked off the search for him, and it was pretty massive and intense. They searched a 2-mile radius around where his car was found, and they specifically focused on the woods alongside the interstate since that's where someone was last seen running into. Authorities brought in cadaver dogs, and they searched by land and air, but absolutely no trace of Logan was ever found. It was like he vanished into thin air. It wasn't until after his disappearance gained some traction on the news that more witnesses came forward, but what they said only adds more mystery to this case. On the morning of May 20th, a witness said that she saw Logan with 2 white men standing at the back of his car. It was parked on the right shoulder of the interstate near where it would eventually be found. She said that as she was coming home that night, she saw his car in the exact same location. Only this time the hood was up and no one was there. At this point in time, it didn't look like the car had crashed yet, which is bizarre because others reported that earlier that day is when it did in fact crash. She described one of the men with Logan that day as around 6 feet tall, had blonde hair and a bowl cut, and was wearing a tank top with jean shorts that were too small for him. The other guy she described as having shoulder-length blonde hair and was wearing a flannel with jeans. Authorities later released a sketch of what one of the men may have looked like, but as of today, their identity remains a mystery. Adding to the creepiness of this case is the fact that later that night, the same night that Logan's car was found, there were sightings of a naked teenager in the area. But again, nobody knows who this was, and it was never really investigated. So police started combing through Logan's phone records, which showed him traveling on I-5 heading south that morning. But then for reasons unknown, he turns around and heads back for a little bit before turning back around, eventually stopping where his car was found. Nobody knows if Logan was even in the car that day with his phone, or if it was stolen. And it's just odd that someone who very obviously does not match his description was seen in the passenger seat. Who was that, and what was he doing? It doesn't make sense to me that multiple different people said that it appeared that no one was driving the car. That is so bizarre to me. Police also discovered that just days before he disappeared, Logan texted a woman that he met on a dating app saying, quote, "I hope I survive this week." End quote. Why he said that, no one knows. As of today, Logan remains missing, but there are a few theories as to what could have happened to him. One theory is that he suffered some sort of mental breakdown after smoking. According to his grandma, she knew that at this time Logan had been smoking and it wasn't anything crazy, but she did worry about him doing this because it seemed to make him a little paranoid at night. He was also going through some personal things, like not really knowing what to do with his life. Logan was a really popular kid who attended Tumwater High School. He was a model student and a star athlete on the football team that everyone loved, but at the end of his senior year, Logan was at a party where a girl made racist remarks to him, and none of his friends stuck up for him, which really hurt him. It affected him so much that he completely cut off his entire friend group, and he made a last-minute decision decision to enroll at WSU in Pullman, which is over 300 miles away. He went there for a year before deciding to move back in with his grandma and sister in Tumwater. He worked a couple of jobs and stayed relatively busy. Some believe that with all of these sudden changes in his life, mixed with him smoking, that he had some sort of mental break, which caused him to tell his grandma that he had an epiphany that morning. And while this might make sense, it still doesn't explain where he is, or why so many different people saw someone that wasn't Logan driving his car that day. The descriptions are just so far off from what Logan looked like, and it wasn't just one person that saw this, it was multiple people, and it was in broad daylight. Another theory is that Logan's sister's boyfriend might have had something to do with his disappearance. Her boyfriend had recently moved into the home with them, and Logan and him reportedly didn't get along. Logan's other family members recall him saying that this boyfriend was a problem, but he wouldn't elaborate more, saying that it seemed like Logan was scared to talk about it. This boyfriend does have a criminal history, but after taking a polygraph and passing, police ruled him out as a suspect. Logan's family has since hired a private investigator, but no trace of Logan has ever been found. Unfortunately, the situation was not handled properly, and since his car was impounded that day, it was never processed by a crime lab, so all potential evidence was either lost or unusable. This is one of the most bizarre cases that I've ever heard of, and it is still unsolved. The fact that so many people go missing after crashing their car is so scary to me. I would do anything to find out what actually happened to them. Whatever happened to Logan that day remains a mystery 8 years later.